Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his forehead as he checked the mining drill readings one more time. The asteroid belt around New Haven Colony always gave him good ore, but today something felt different. The readings on his scanner showed strange energy patterns coming from the outer edge of the belt. He had been working these rocks for 3 years now, and he knew when something was not right. "Riley, you seeing this on your end?" Jake called into his comm unit to Captain Riley Martinez, who was running the operation from the main ship. "Yeah, I got weird readings too," Riley's voice crackled back through the static. "Might be solar interference, or maybe one of those new mining companies moved into our sector." Jake adjusted his small mining pod and looked out through the clear metal window. Space looked the same as always, dark and full of stars, but his gut told him trouble was coming. He had learned to trust that feeling during his 5 years in the Earth military before he came out here to mine. That feeling had kept him alive more times than he could count. The energy readings spiked higher. Jake's scanner started beeping, faster and faster until it became one long warning sound. He reached for the emergency beacon button when a massive shadow fell over his tiny mining pod. Jake looked up and felt his blood turn cold. The ship above him was bigger than anything he had ever seen. It stretched across the sky like a metal mountain, all curves and sharp points that seemed to cut through space itself. Strange blue lights ran along its sides, pulsing like a heartbeat. The metal was silver and gold mixed together, shining like nothing humans had ever built. "Riley, we got a problem," Jake said into his comm, but only static came back. The huge ship was blocking all signals. More ships appeared around the first one, smaller but still much bigger than Jake's mining pod. They moved in perfect formation, surrounding the human mining operation like wolves circling sheep. Jake counted at least 20 ships, all with the same strange metal and blue lights. Jake's pod shook as some kind of beam locked onto him. He tried to fire up his engines to run, but nothing happened. The beam held him tight like an invisible hand. Through his window, he could see the same thing happening to the other mining pods scattered throughout the asteroid field. One by one, they were being pulled toward the massive ship. The aliens, whoever they were, worked fast and smooth. Jake could see his fellow miners in their pods, all being dragged along by the same kind of beam that held him. Riley's command ship was also caught, looking tiny next to the alien vessel that captured it. Jake's pod was pulled into a huge opening in the side of the alien ship. The inside was nothing like human ships. Everything glowed with soft blue light, and the walls curved in ways that hurt his eyes to look at. Strange symbols covered every surface, moving and changing like living things. The air tasted different when his pod's door was forced open, cleaner but with a metallic tang that made his nose wrinkle. Tall figures in flowing robes waited for them. Jake got his first look at the aliens who had captured them. They were humanoid, but taller than any human, maybe 7 feet high. Their skin was pale blue-white, and their eyes were large and golden. They moved with grace, like dancers, but Jake could see the weapons at their sides. The aliens separated the humans into groups. Jake found himself with 5 other miners, including Riley. They were marched through corridors that seemed to go on forever, past rooms filled with strange machines and other captured beings from different species. Jake saw creatures he could not even describe, all wearing the same gray clothes that marked them as prisoners. "Stay calm, everyone," Riley whispered to his team. "We don't know what they want yet." One of the tall aliens heard him and made a sound like wind chimes. Another alien approached and spoke in perfect English. "You will have answers soon. The Queen wishes to see the humans." Jake felt a chill run down his back. These aliens had learned human language, which meant they had been watching Earth or had captured other humans before. Either way, it was bad. News for him and his crew. They were brought to a massive chamber with a high ceiling that seemed to disappear into darkness. The walls were covered in the same moving symbols, but here they glowed brighter, casting dancing shadows everywhere. At the far end of the room sat a throne, made of what looked like living crystal that pulsed with inner light. On the throne sat the most beautiful and terrifying being Jake had ever seen. She was clearly the same species as the others, but taller and more elegant. Her robes flowed around her like water, changing colors from deep blue to silver to gold. A crown of the same living crystal sat on her head, and when she looked at the humans, her golden eyes seemed to see right through them. "I am Queen Lyra Lay of the Zephyrian Empire." Her voice was like music, but with an edge of steel underneath. "You are now property of the Empire, to be used as we see fit." The other miners looked terrified, but Jake felt something different rise up inside him. It was the same feeling he had gotten when drill sergeants tried to break him down in basic training, the same feeling when alien pirates had attacked his first mining ship. It was anger, mixed with stubborn refusal to give up. Queen Lyra Lay walked down from her throne, her robes flowing behind her. She looked at each human in turn, studying them like specimens in a laboratory. When she reached Jake, she stopped and tilted her head to one side. "This one is different," she said to one of her advisors, a shorter alien in military dress. "Look at his eyes, Commander Vex. The others show fear and despair, but this one shows defiance." Jake met her golden gaze and did not look away. He had learned long ago that showing weakness only made bullies stronger. Even if these aliens had technology beyond human understanding, even if they could destroy him with a thought, he would not bow down. Queen Lyra Lay stepped closer to Jake until she was only inches away. Her alien scent filled his nose, something like flowers mixed with ozone. When she spoke, her voice was soft but carried clearly through the huge chamber. "Tell me, human," she said, her golden eyes locked on his. "Are you free?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Jake could feel the eyes of his fellow humans on him, could sense the alien guards ready to strike him down if he gave the wrong answer. But there was only one answer he could give, only one answer that was true to who he was. "Yes," Jake said, his voice steady and strong. "I am free." Queen Lyra Lay smiled then, and it was not a kind smile. It was the smile of a predator who had found interesting prey. "We shall see," she said. Jake woke up in a cell that was too clean and too bright. The walls glowed with the same soft blue light he had seen throughout the alien ship, and there was no door that he could see, just smooth walls that curved together like the inside of an egg. He sat up on what served as a bed, though it felt more like sleeping on a cloud that somehow held his weight. His gray prisoner clothes were made of material he had never felt before, soft but strong, and they fit him perfectly even though no one had measured him. Everything about this place was too perfect, too clean, too controlled. It made his skin crawl. A section of the wall shimmered and became transparent. Queen Lyra Lay stood on the other side, still wearing her flowing robes, but without the crystal crown. Her golden eyes studied him with the same interest a scientist might show when looking at a new specimen. "You slept well, human Jake Morrison," she said, and her voice came through the wall as clearly as if there was nothing between them. "I know your name now and your history. Former Earth military, mining engineer, no family, no close ties, a perfect test subject." "Test subject for what?" Jake asked, standing up and walking to the transparent wall. "To see if your claim of freedom has any meaning beyond words," Queen Lyra Lay said. "In my experience, all species eventually accept their place in the natural order. Some take longer than others, but they all break eventually." The wall section that had been transparent shimmered again and became solid. A different section opened up like a door that had not been there before. Two alien guards waited outside, tall and silent in their flowing robes. They gestured for Jake to follow them. The corridors of the ship were busy with activity. Jake saw hundreds of different alien species working at various tasks. All wore the same gray clothing as him, and all had the same defeated look in their eyes. They moved like machines, doing their work without thought or feeling. It reminded Jake of pictures he had seen of old Earth factories, where workers did the same job over and over until they became part of the machine. The guards brought Jake to a massive industrial section of the ship. The ceiling stretched up so high he could not see the top, and huge machines filled the space like metal giants. The air was hot and full of the smell of burning metal and strange chemicals. Sparks flew from welding stations where different alien species worked on ship repairs and construction. An alien that looked like a cross between a lizard and a man approached Jake. His scales were dull green, and his yellow eyes held no hope at all. He spoke in broken English with an accent Jake had never heard before. "I am Kith of the Sauron people," the lizard alien said. "You work with me now. We fix power systems. You do what I show you, no questions, no problems." Keth led Jake to a workstation where complex alien machinery hummed and sparked. The tools were different from anything humans used, but Jake could see their purpose. Power flowed through crystal conduits instead of metal wires, and the energy patterns were more complex than Earth technology, but the basic principles were the same. "This is your station," Keth said, pointing to a section of machinery that was clearly broken. "You fix this, then fix next one, then next one. Always fixing, never finished. This is life now." Jake looked at the broken machinery and then at Keth. The Sauron's shoulders were bent with defeat, and his movements were slow and tired. Around them, other alien workers did their tasks with the same mechanical precision, never speaking, never looking up from their work. "How long have you been here?" Jake asked. "Time has no meaning," Keth said. 5 cycles, maybe 6. Before, I was engineer on my home world, built great cities, solved hard problems. Now I fix same machines over and over. Better not to think about before." Jake picked up one of the alien tools and examined it. The weight was wrong for his hands, but he could adapt. He had always been good at adapting. "What if we could fix these machines better?" he said. "What if we could make them work so well they didn't break as often?" Keth looked around nervously. "We do what we are told. Nothing more, nothing less. Too much thinking brings punishment." But Jake was already studying the broken machinery with the eye of an engineer. The power crystal was cracked, yes, but the real problem was in the housing design. The crystal was under too much stress because the support structure was wrong. Fix the support, reduce the stress, and the crystals would last much longer. Jake began to work, not just replacing the broken crystal, but redesigning the support system using spare parts from other stations. His hands moved quickly and surely, the way they always did when he was solving a problem. Engineering problems were like puzzles, and Jake had always loved puzzles. Keth watched him work with growing amazement. "You changed the design," he whispered. "This is not allowed." "They want it fixed, right?" Jake said, not looking up from his work. "I'm fixing it better than before." Other workers had begun to notice what Jake was doing. A small crowd gathered around his workstation, watching him modify the alien machinery with growing interest. For the first time since Jake had arrived, he saw something other than defeat in their eyes. A blue-skinned alien female approached cautiously. She looked almost human except for her pale blue skin and large dark eyes. "I am Mira Chen," she said, in perfect English. "I was captured from Earth colony ship 6 months ago. I was a xenobiologist before they caught me." Jake looked up from his work. "Another human. Good to meet you, Mira. You've been watching what the others do here." "Yes," Mira said. "They have given up hope. They do only what they are told, and nothing more. But you are different. You are thinking, creating, improving." Jake finished his modifications and activated the power system. The crystal hummed to life, but instead of the harsh buzzing it had made before, it ran smooth and quiet. The power output was 20% higher than the original design, and the stress indicators showed green across the board. Keth stared at the improved machine in wonder. "It works better than new," he said. "In all my time here, no one has made anything work better." Word of Jake's improvement spread through the works section like wildfire. Soon, other workers were bringing him broken equipment, asking if he could fix it better. Jake began to teach them his methods, showing them how to think about problems instead of just following orders. "Look at the whole system," he told a group of workers gathered around his station. "Don't just replace the broken part, ask why it broke. Ask how you can make it stronger." The workers began to straighten up as they listened. Jake saw hope creeping back into their eyes, saw them begin to think and question for the first time in cycles. They started to work together, sharing ideas and helping each other solve problems. An overseer alien noticed the change and came to investigate. Overseer Grix was bigger than the other aliens with sharp features and cold silver eyes. He wore robes of deep red instead of the blue of the regular guards, marking his higher rank. "What is happening here?" Grix demanded, his voice sharp with anger. "These workers are supposed to follow procedures, not create new ones." Jake stood up to face the overseer. "The machines work better now," he said calmly. "Isn't that what you want?" "I want obedience," Grix snapped. "I want workers who do as they are told without question. Your behavior is disrupting the order of things." But even as Grix spoke, Jake could see uncertainty in his silver eyes. The work output had increased dramatically since Jake started teaching the others. The quality of repairs was better than it had ever been. Even an overseer had to notice. Results like that. "Take this human back to his cell," Grix ordered the guards. "Let the queen decide what to do with him." As the guards led Jake away, he looked back at the workers he had been teaching. They were still standing straighter, still had that spark of hope in their eyes. Keth gave him a small nod of respect, and Mira smiled despite the danger. The guards brought Jake back through the corridors to the crystal throne room. Queen Lyrelei was waiting for him, and this time she was not alone. Commander Vex stood beside her throne, and several other high-ranking aliens filled the chamber. "I have heard interesting reports about your work today," Queen Lyrelei said as Jake was brought before her. "You have improved our machinery and infected our workers with dangerous ideas." "I fixed what was broken," Jake said. "I taught others to think instead of just follow orders. If that's dangerous to you, maybe you should ask yourself why." "Queen." Lyrelei leaned forward on her throne, her golden eyes intense. "You believe that freedom means the right to change things, to improve upon what exists. I believe freedom means the right to think," Jake said. "The right to see a problem and try to solve it. The right to make things better instead of just accepting them as they are." The queen was silent for a long moment, studying Jake with those penetrating golden eyes. When she finally spoke, her voice was thoughtful. "Return him to the work section," she told the guards. "Let him continue his improvements. I want to see how far this human freedom of his can spread." As Jake was led away, he caught sight of Queen Lyrelei's expression. For just a moment, her perfect alien composure had cracked, and he saw something unexpected in her golden eyes. Curiosity. 3 weeks had passed since Jake returned to the work section, and the changes were impossible to ignore. The industrial area hummed with new energy as workers from dozens of different species collaborated on improvements to the ship's systems. Productivity had increased by 40%, and for the first time in cycles, workers were smiling while they labored. Jake had become the unofficial leader of the work teams, teaching engineering principles to aliens who had forgotten they were capable of innovation. Keth had regained his confidence as an engineer, designing new support structures for the power crystals. Mira used her knowledge of biology to improve the air filtration systems by understanding how different species processed oxygen. But Jake knew their success was attracting dangerous attention. Overseer Grix watched everything with growing anger, and the guards had been increased around the work areas. Change was spreading too fast for the Zephyrian system to contain. The summons came during the night shift. 2 guards appeared at Jake's workstation and gestured for him to follow. This time, they did not take him to the throne room, but to a smaller chamber he had never seen before. The walls were covered with what looked like living artwork, patterns that shifted and changed like slow-moving water. Queen Lyrelei was waiting for him, but she looked different. She wore simple robes instead of her elaborate court dress, and her crystal crown was nowhere to be seen. She looked smaller somehow, more human, though still impossibly elegant. "Sit," she said, gesturing to a chair that formed itself from the flowing wall as Jake watched. "We need to talk, you and I." Jake sat carefully, not trusting furniture that had not existed moments before. "About what?" he asked. "About freedom," Queen Lyrelei said, taking a seat across from him. "About what you have done to my ship, to my workers, to the order I have spent centuries maintaining." "I've made things better," Jake said simply. "Is that a crime in your empire?" Queen Lyrelei was quiet for a moment, her golden eyes studying him with an intensity that made Jake uncomfortable. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, more thoughtful than he had ever heard it. "Do you know how old I am, Jake Morrison?" she asked. "I have no idea. I have lived for over 800 of your Earth years," she said. "I have ruled the Zephyrian Empire for 400 of those years. In that time, I have conquered 43 different species and brought them into our fold." Jake felt a chill at the casual way she spoke about conquest, about the destruction of entire civilizations. "And you're proud of that." "I was," Queen Lyrelei said. "Each conquest brought new resources, new workers, new knowledge to the Empire. We became the most powerful force in this galaxy, spanning thousands of star systems. She stood up and walked to a wall display that activated at her approach. Images appeared showing different alien worlds, all under Zephyrian control. Jake saw species he recognized from the work sections, and dozens more he had never encountered. But something went wrong about 50 years ago, the Queen continued. Our expansion slowed, then stopped completely. Our technology stopped advancing. Our ships, once the finest in the galaxy, began to fall behind other powers we had once dominated, easily. Jake watched the images change, showing Zephyrian ships that looked older and less advanced than the ones he had seen. What happened? At first, we thought it was resource depletion or political instability, Queen Lyrelai said. But our scientists eventually discovered the truth. Every species we had conquered had stopped innovating completely. They followed orders perfectly, but they never created anything new. The Queen turned back to face Jake, and for the first time he saw something like vulnerability in her golden eyes. We had been so successful at breaking their spirits that we broke their ability to think, she said. A conquered species becomes efficient at following instructions, but they lose the spark that drives innovation. We had turned our greatest assets into nothing more than biological machines. Jake began to understand the true scope of what the Queen was telling him. Your empire is dying because you destroyed the creativity of everyone in it. Yes, Queen Lyrelai said simply, and then we found humans. She activated another display, this one showing Earth and its colonies. Jake saw his homeworld from space, blue and green and beautiful, surrounded by the mining stations and research outposts that humanity had built in just a few centuries of space travel. Humans are different from every species we have encountered, the Queen said. Your technology is primitive compared to ours, your ships are crude, your weapons are basic, but you innovate constantly. You improve everything you touch. You refuse to accept limitations. Jake thought about his time in the work sections, about how quickly the other species had responded to his teaching once they remembered how to think. The others can innovate too, he said. They just forgot how because you beat it out of them. Perhaps, Queen Lyrelai said. But humans seem immune to that process. We have captured human settlements before, brought humans into our workforce, but they continue to improve and create no matter what we do to them. Even under the most harsh conditions, humans adapt and overcome. She walked closer to Jake, her alien scent filling his nostrils. That is why I asked if you were free. She said, freedom is not just a human word, it is a human quality. Other species can be taught to follow freedom, but humans seem to be born with it. Jake felt a surge of pride at her words, but also a growing understanding of the danger humans faced. You want to study us, he said. Figure out how to break us like you broke the others. That was the original plan, Queen Lyrelai admitted. Capture enough humans to understand your psychology, then use that knowledge to make you as compliant as the rest of our subjects. Was, Jake asked, noting her use of past tense. Queen Lyrelai was quiet for a long moment, seeming to wrestle with internal conflict. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Watching you work these past weeks has changed my perspective, she said. You did not just improve our machinery. You awakened something in the other species that I thought was gone forever. You gave them back their dignity, their purpose, their joy in creation. Jake saw where this conversation was leading, and it both excited and terrified him. You're thinking about changing how your empire works. I am thinking about many things, Queen Lyrelai said. For 400 years, I have ruled through fear and domination. It brought us great power, but also great stagnation. Perhaps there is another way. Before Jake could respond, alarms began to sound throughout the ship. The lighting changed from soft blue to harsh red, and Commander Vex's voice echoed through the chamber. My queen, we have a situation in the work sections. The humans' influence has spread beyond containment. Multiple species are refusing direct orders and demanding better working conditions. Queen Lyrelai's expression hardened, and for a moment, Jake saw the iron ruler she had been for centuries. It seems your freedom is more contagious than even I expected, she said. More alarms sounded. and Jake could hear the sound of running feet in the corridors outside. Something big was happening, something that went far beyond improved machinery and better working conditions. "What will you do now?" Jake asked. Queen Lyrelei looked at him for a long moment, then activated a communication device on her wrist. "Commander Vex, bring security teams to the work sections, but do not engage unless directly threatened. I want to see how this develops." She turned back to Jake with something that might have been a smile. "You asked me what I will do now," she said. "I think the better question is what we will do now. Your revolution has begun whether you intended it or not. The question is whether it will destroy my empire or transform it." Jake felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. In trying to make things a little better for himself and his fellow workers, he had apparently started something much larger. The other species were no longer content to simply follow orders. They were remembering what it meant to think, to choose, to hope. "There's something else you need to know," Queen Lyrelei said, her voice suddenly urgent. 3 Imperial battle fleets are approaching this system. They were sent to collect our human specimens and bring them back to the Empire's research facilities. Jake's blood went cold. "How long do we have?" 6 hours, perhaps 7, the Queen said. "After that, everything changes. The Empire's leadership will either accept my authority to handle this situation as I see fit, or they will remove me and take direct control." Jake stood up, his mind racing with possibilities. "Then we need to move fast." "We?" Queen Lyrelei asked, raising one elegant eyebrow. "You said it yourself," Jake replied. "This revolution has started whether I intended it or not. If we're going to have any chance against 3 battle fleets, we need every species on this ship working together, not as slaves but as allies." Queen Lyrelei nodded slowly. "Then let us see if human freedom can teach an old empire new ways to survive." As they left the chamber together, Jake could hear the sounds of change echoing through the ship's corridors. The revolution he had never intended to start was spreading through every level of the vessel, and there was no turning back. Now, the real test of human freedom was about to begin. The work sections had transformed into something Jake had never seen before. Aliens from dozens of different species worked side by side, no longer divided by the artificial barriers the Zephyrians had created. Keth stood on an improvised platform, explaining power distribution principles to a mixed crowd of beings who hung on his every word. Mira had organized teams of biologists and engineers who were redesigning the ship's life support systems to work more efficiently for all species aboard. But the most remarkable change was in their faces. The defeated, hopeless expressions were gone, replaced by determination and something Jake recognized from his military days. These beings were preparing for war. "Jake," Keth called out as he spotted the human approaching. "We have been waiting. The security forces tried to stop the meetings, but we outnumber them 20-1. They retreated to defensive positions." Jake looked around the massive industrial space and saw that the aliens had been busy. Workstations had been converted into planning centers where different species shared their knowledge. The reptilian Saurons were working with insectoid beings to design better communication systems. Flying species were coordinating with underground dwellers to map every section of the ship. "How many are with us?" Jake asked. "All of them," Mira said, approaching with a tablet covered in alien writing. "Every single worker on this ship has joined the uprising. Even some of the lower-ranking guards have abandoned their posts to join us." Commander Vex appeared at the entrance to the work section, flanked by a squad of heavily armed Zephyrian guards. His silver eyes were cold with anger as he surveyed the organized chaos before him. "This ends now," he announced, his voice amplified to carry throughout the space. "Return to your stations immediately, or face the consequences." No one moved. Hundreds of beings from dozens of species stood their ground, looking to Jake for guidance. He could feel their trust, their hope, their willingness to follow him into an uncertain future. The weight of leadership had never felt heavier. "What consequences?" Jake asked, stepping forward to face the commander. "Will you kill us all? Who will run your ship then? Who will maintain your systems and fix your machines?" Commander Vex's expression darkened. "We can always acquire new workers." "Not like these," Jake said, gesturing to the organized teams around him. "These workers are improving your ship beyond anything you thought possible." Your power systems are running at 120% efficiency. Your life support systems are cleaner and more stable than they've ever been. Your manufacturing capabilities have doubled. Jake took another step forward, aware that every being in the massive space was watching this confrontation. You can kill us all, he said, but you'll be destroying the most productive workforce your empire has ever had. Is that really what Queen Lyrelei wants? Commander Vex hesitated, and Jake saw uncertainty flicker across his alien features. The commander activated his communication device and spoke in rapid Zephyrian. Jake could not understand the words, but he caught the tone of a subordinate asking for orders from a superior. Queen Lyrelei's voice came back through the communicator, speaking in English so everyone could understand. Commander Vex, you will stand down, she said. I want to see what these workers can accomplish when they organize themselves. The commander's face showed shock and anger. My queen, this is dangerous. If word spreads to other ships, to other systems. Then perhaps it is time for word to spread, Queen Lyrelei said. Stand down, Commander. That is an order. Vex lowered his weapon, but his silver eyes promised that this confrontation was far from over. He and his guards withdrew, leaving the workers in control of the industrial section. Jake felt a surge of relief, but he knew they had only bought themselves a little time. Listen to me, he called out to the assembled workers. We have maybe 5 hours before Imperial battle fleets arrive. If we're going to survive this, we need to be ready for anything. The next few hours passed in a blur of frantic activity. Jake organized the workers into specialized teams, each focusing on a different aspect of ship operations. The engineers worked on improving weapons and defensive systems. The biologists enhanced communications and life support. The strongest species prepared for possible boarding actions, while the most agile mapped escape routes through the ship. What amazed Jake most was how naturally the different species worked together once the artificial barriers were removed. Beings who had been kept separate for cycles discovered they had complementary skills and knowledge. The hive-minded insectoids were perfect for coordinating complex operations, while the individualistic mammals excelled at creative problem-solving. Keth approached Jake as he supervised modifications to the ship's power distribution grid. Jake, I must tell you something, the Sauron said, his yellow eyes serious. Before we were conquered, my people were warriors as well as engineers. We know how to fight. How many of the others have combat experience? Jake asked. More than you might think, Keth replied. The Zephyrians chose their targets carefully, but many of us remember the old ways. We have just been afraid to remember for too long. Jake nodded, feeling a plan beginning to form in his mind. Spread the word quietly, he said. I want every being with military experience to meet in Section 7 in 1 hour. The meeting in Section 7 revealed a hidden truth about the Zephyrian Empire. Nearly half of the worker species had been warriors before their conquest. They had been broken psychologically, but their knowledge and instincts remained. Under Jake's guidance, they began to remember not just how to fight, but why they had fought in the first place. A 4-armed alien named Zara had been a fleet commander for her people before the conquest. A crystalline being called Tor had designed defensive strategies that held off Zephyrian forces for 3 years. Even some of the more peaceful species had knowledge that could be weaponized, understanding of chemistry and physics that could be turned against their former oppressors. We cannot match their firepower, Jake told the assembled group. But we know this ship better than they do now. We've improved it, modified it, learned every system and corridor. That gives us advantages they won't expect. The plan they developed was audacious in its scope. Instead of trying to fight the Imperial fleets directly, they would turn the ship itself into a weapon. The improved power systems could be overloaded to create electromagnetic pulses that would disable nearby vessels. The manufacturing areas could be converted to produce crude but effective weapons for the different species. The life support systems could be modified to create atmospheric barriers that would trap boarders in specific sections. But the most important part of the plan was psychological. Jake had realized that the other ships in the Imperial fleet would be crewed by the same broken, dispirited workers they had been just weeks before. If they could broadcast their message of freedom throughout the fleet, they might inspire uprisings on other vessels as well. As the deadline approached, Jake found himself in the ship's communications center with Mira and a team of technicians from various species. They had jury-rigged the communications array to broadcast on all frequencies, preparing to send their message to every ship in the approaching fleet. "Are you sure about this?" Mira asked. "Once we broadcast, there's no going back." Jake looked around at the beings working frantically to prepare for the coming battle. He saw hope in their eyes, determination in their movements. They were no longer slaves following orders, but free beings choosing to fight for their future. "They asked if I was free," Jake said. "Now it's time to show them what freedom really means." The alarm sounded again as the Imperial fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. 3 massive battle cruisers appeared on the displays, each one larger than the ship they were on. Jake could see smaller escort vessels spreading out to surround them, cutting off any possibility of escape. But escape had never been part of the plan. Queen Lyral. The hour that followed would be remembered in galactic history as the moment everything changed. Jake stood in the ship's command center, surrounded by beings from dozens of species who had chosen freedom over servitude. Through the viewing screens, he could see the 3 Imperial battle cruisers holding position, but their formations were ragged. Emergency lights flashed on all 3 vessels as internal uprisings spread through their crews. Queen Lyra had taken her place on the command throne, but she was no longer the distant ruler Jake had first encountered. She wore simple work clothes, like the others, and her crystal crown sat forgotten on a side table. When she spoke, it was as part of the team rather than as an absolute authority. "Reports coming in from all 3 battle cruisers," Mira announced from her position at the communications console. "Work crews on the Dominion Sphere have seized engineering sections. The Stellar Fang has lost power to its weapon systems. The Iron Crown is reporting massive system failures." Jake felt a surge of hope, but he knew the real test was still coming. "Any word from Admiral Korath?" "He's demanded to speak with Queen Lyralai directly," Mira said. "Private channel only." Queen Lyralai nodded and activated the secure communications system. Admiral Korath's image appeared on the main screen, and Jake could see that the Zephyrian commander was barely containing his rage. "What have you done?" Korath demanded. "My ships are in chaos. Centuries of order destroyed in a single hour." "I have shown them what they could become," Queen Lyralai replied calmly. "What we all could become if we chose cooperation over domination." "This is madness," Korath said. "The Empire will not stand for this rebellion. More fleets are already being dispatched to contain this infection before it spreads further." Jake stepped into view of the communication screen. "It's already too late for that," he said. "Your own crews have heard the message. Every ship in your fleet is questioning the old ways. You can try to suppress them, but how long will that work? How many ships will you have to destroy to maintain control?" Admiral Korath's silver eyes turned to Jake with undisguised hatred. "You think you understand the consequences of what you've started, human? The Empire spans thousands of worlds. Billions of beings depend on the order we maintain. They depend on the freedom to think and grow," Jake replied. "Your empire is dying because you forgot that growth comes from creativity, not control." The communication was interrupted by alarms from the Admiral's own ship. Through the audio, Jake could hear explosions and the sound of running feet. Korath's image flickered as power fluctuations affected his transmission. "My queen," came the voice of one of the Admiral's subordinates. "The work crews have seized the main engineering deck. They're demanding to speak with the human." Korath's face showed defeat and fury in equal measure. "You have destroyed everything we built," he said to Queen Lyralai. "No," she replied. "I have chosen to build something better." The queen stood up from her throne and looked around the command center at the mixed crew of former slaves who had become her allies. "Open communications to all ships," she ordered. "Full broadcast, all frequencies." When the channels were open, Queen Lyralai began to speak. Her voice carried across space to reach every being in the fleet and through them to recording systems that would spread her message across the galaxy. "I am Queen Lyralai of the Zephyrian Empire," she said. "For 400 years, I have ruled through fear and domination. I convinced myself that order was more important than freedom, that control was more valuable than creativity. I was wrong." Jake watched the faces around him as the queen continued. Hope and wonder filled their expressions as they realized what she was doing. "The human Jake Morrison asked me a question that I could not answer," the queen continued. He asked why freedom should be dangerous to us. Today I learned the answer. Freedom is dangerous to tyranny, but it is the source of all progress, all growth, all hope for a better future. Through the communication channels, Jake could hear the sounds of cheering from the other ships. Work crews throughout the fleet were celebrating as they realized their revolution had the support of the Queen herself. Effective immediately, Queen Lyrelei announced, the Zephyrian Empire will transition to a new form of government. All sentient beings will be granted full citizenship and the right to participate in their own governance. Slavery is abolished. Forced labor is ended. Every species will have the opportunity to contribute their unique knowledge and abilities to our common future. Admiral Korath's image reappeared on screen, but his expression had changed. The fury was still there, but underneath it Jake saw something else. Uncertainty, and perhaps the first stirrings of hope. "My queen," Korath said slowly, "do you realize what you're proposing? The other imperial powers will see this as weakness. They will attack us. Let them come," Queen Lyrelei said. "They will find us stronger than ever before. Free beings fight harder than slaves. Cooperative societies innovate faster than tyrannies. We will show them that liberty is not weakness, but the greatest strength." Jake stepped forward again. "Admiral, your own crews have proven that today. The moment they were given a choice, they chose to improve their ships, their lives, their future. That's not weakness. That's evolution." The next several hours passed in a blur of negotiations and planning. Admiral Korath, faced with mutinous crews and undeniable proof of the superior effectiveness of free workers, agreed to implement the Queen's reforms on his vessels. One by one, the work crews throughout the fleet organized themselves into governing councils, sharing knowledge and resources in ways that had been forbidden under the old system. Jake found himself appointed as the first human ambassador to the new Zephyrian Federation. His role would be to help other species rediscover their capacity for innovation and self-governance, to spread the message of freedom that had started with a simple question about repairing broken machinery. 3 days later, Jake stood on the observation deck of what had once been Queen Lyrelei's flagship. The ship had been renamed the New Horizon, and it was heading toward New Haven Colony to establish the first free trade agreement between humans and the reformed Zephyrian Federation. Queen Lyrelei joined him at the viewing window. She still wore her simple work clothes, though she had resumed wearing her crystal crown as a symbol of her new role as elected leader of the Federation Council. "Do you regret asking me that question?" she said. Jake smiled, remembering that moment in the crystal throne room that seemed like a lifetime ago. "Which question?" "Are you free, human?" Jake looked out at the stars, at the ships of the new Federation, fleet traveling alongside them. He thought about Keth and Mira and all the other beings who had rediscovered hope and purpose. He thought about the colonies throughout human space that would now be protected by allies instead of threatened by enemies. "No," he said. "I don't regret it at all, but I think the better question now is whether we're all free." Queen Lyrelei smiled, and this time it was warm and genuine. "Yes," she said, "we are all free, and that makes us stronger than we ever dreamed possible." As the New Horizon entered hyperspace toward humanity's colonies, Jake reflected on how a simple mining engineer had accidentally started a revolution that changed the galaxy. He had answered the Queen's question about his freedom, but in doing so, he had taught an entire empire what freedom really meant. The revolution was complete, but the real work was just beginning. Building a free society was harder than overthrowing a tyrannical one. But Jake had faith in the beings around him, in their capacity to grow and learn and create. Freedom was contagious, and it was spreading across the stars. When the alien queen had asked if he was free, Jake had answered yes. Now, thanks to that simple answer, billions of beings throughout the galaxy could give the same response. They were all free, and they would make sure that freedom survived and thrived among the stars. The future belonged to those brave enough to choose it.